So this morning we're beginning a new summer message series that's entitled Losing the Culture War. And this series is going to be an important series. Not that any of the message series we do, feels like, this one's a throwaway, but this one's going to be important. No, I think they're all important. But this is going to be important because in the series we're going to be looking at some of the hot topics that are affecting American culture right now. More importantly, we're going to be looking at what the Bible has to say about how we as Christ followers should be thinking about these hot topics. And then with that, we're going to be looking at what it is that we're supposed to do, how it is that we're supposed to respond, how it is that we are supposed to be as Christ followers in the midst of what is happening in our culture. And so this morning I'm really just going to kind of set the table for what is happening in American culture in general and how that is, impinging, or where the church is impinging upon our changing culture. So we're just going to set the stage this morning and then pick up next week with a hot topic, which there's a pun in there and you don't even realize the pun until the very last slide, and then you'll be, I get it. All right, anyway, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for your presence here this morning, and we invite you to continue to speak, continue to move, and Lord, even in this kind of introductory message this morning, that you would shape our hearts, you would shape our thinking. And Lord, I pray that we would actually walk away with a clearer focus this morning and actually, Lord, encouraged about what you're doing where we live. So Lord, you make that happen in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, so this, by the way, on the bottom here, you can see the message notes for our sermons. We post each week on the YouVersion Bible app. And so if you've not yet downloaded the YouVersion Bible app to your smartphone, you can do that. And then if you click on the menu, select events, you'll find Vineyard Community Church there, and that way you can follow along with the notes on the screen. So some of you may have seen this past December, this was the cover story of Newsweek magazine, Jesus Saves, and right above the S in Jesus, you see what? Yeah, the Republican elephant. But if you notice this subtitle, Jesus Saves, Young Evangelicals Are Fleeing the Church. I don't know if you saw this. Young evangelicals are fleeing the church. And then the next sentence is very interesting. Can the Republicans survive? I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Let me go on a little field trip. First of all, for those of you who really don't have a grasp on what the word evangelical means, I just want to take a moment to kind of frame that for you. In the simplest terms, if you think of the Christian church, like in terms of being a tree, like a family tree, this label evangelical describes kind of a group of branches, a cluster of branches that are pretty similar in the basics of their Christian doctrine that they subscribe to, and who also share the shared value that it's important for the Christian church to be sharing the good news with the people of the world, to be evangelizing non-Christians, and that's where we get this label, evangelical. Does that make sense? And so on this tree, kind of the upper right-hand corner is roughly the branches of evangelicalism. If I redesign this tree, which because of my nerd, I was tempted to, but you could probably reposition the branches to more clearly circle churches that probably are in the evangelical tradition. All right, but Vineyard would be classified as an evangelical church. So young adults are leaving the evangelical church. They're fleeing the church. That sounds grim, doesn't it? They're fleeing the church. And even if you didn't read this particular article, I'm sure most of you, if you follow news media at all, you have no doubt heard reports, of the impending doom, the decline of Christianity in the United States. Right? One article I read just even this week predicted that within the next 10 years, in the next decade, evangelical or Christianity would disappear from the United States. Have you been hearing these kind of reports? Yeah? Yeah, okay. And if you have, these reports, if they're to be believed, really makes it feel like or seem like the Christian church is on the ropes, right? And it can be discouraging, like we're playing for the losing team. All right? And so this is the first point I really want to make this morning is the Christian church is not on the ropes in the United States. The Christian church is not on the ropes in the United States. And it's important for you to know, and it's important for us to not get discouraged. Did you hear that? It's important for us to not get discouraged. Let me give you a couple reasons why the Christian church is not on the ropes. First of all, God has promised it won't happen. It won't happen. All right, Isaiah 9:7. The prophet Isaiah is squinting into the future and he's seeing the coming of God's Messiah, Jesus the Messiah. This is what the prophet Isaiah saw about Jesus. There will be no end to the, what's the word? Increase of his government or of his peace. Say peace. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice, say justice, and righteousness, say righteousness, from then on, and what's the next word? Forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. So there's this promise that we have about Jesus' rule, the Messiah's rule, that it's going to be a rule of peace. It's going to be a rule of justice. It's going to be a rule of righteousness. That is being made right with God. And this will be an incessant rule. Right? Didn't we see that? There will be no end. Forevermore. Right? No end forevermore. No end to the rule of Jesus' peace and righteousness and justice. And the guarantee we have that this is going to be the way it is the zeal of the Lord, the passion of God, the energy, the power of God is going to make sure this is going to happen. And so God has promised that Jesus' kingdom rule will never be on the ropes. Never, ever, ever be on the ropes. Amen. All right, it's not going to happen. Now track with me then as I connect a couple other dots. So verses like Colossians 1:18 tell us that Jesus' incessantly increasing kingdom rule will be extended over the church. His rule will be extended over the church, and his rule will be extended through the church. All right, I'm connecting Jesus' rule with y'all, with us. All right, we see this Colossians 1:18. Christ is also head of the church. That means he's the big cheese. He's the boss. The church is his body, and so he's the beginning. He's supreme over all who rise from the dead, and so he is first in everything. And so this verse is simply telling us that we are Christ's body. The king who is ruling over all, whose kingdom is incessantly increasing here on earth, his body through which his rule is being extended on the earth is y'all, right? It's you. It's me. And God has promised this never-ending, ever-increasing kingdom, right, will never be on the ropes. All right, continuing. And now the last dot, Jesus then has promised that his body, the church, y'all, right, will never, ever, ever, ever be the losing team. All right, we see this in Matthew 16:18. Now I say to you that you are Peter. He's talking to the apostle Peter. And you know that word, that name means rock. You're the rock, Peter. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer the church. All right? All the powers of hell will never, ever conquer the church, which is Jesus' body, through which Jesus' kingdom rule of peace and justice and righteousness, which is incessantly increasing, will take place. All right, and so to pull that all together, the Christian church is not on the ropes because God has promised won't happen. It just simply won't happen. And so don't get discouraged, church. All right, but so listen to this. So that's kind of theology. Here is, I'm not sure what to call this, but we're going to shift. Secondly, the Christian church is not on the ropes. Let's see, and you need to know this because the doom and gloom reports that we're hearing and reading in the news are politics, not statistics. You know, I should explain something here. My laptop that I'm normally reading my notes off of went to be with Jesus this week. And so I'm reading off old school notes, but my bifocal, or actually I'm in trifocals now. It's just like, I can't see anything up here. So if it seems a little shaky this morning, there's a logical explanation. All right, where are we? Oh, statistics. The doom and gloom reports that we're hearing in the media are politics, not statistics. Let's say that. Politics, not statistics. Listen to this. Young evangelicals are not fleeing the church. It's not happening. It's absolutely not happening. It's actually a statistical fact that the number of young adults who are attending evangelical churches, who are attending Christian churches, is actually at a historical all-time high. All right? Ever since, people in white lab coats with notepads who are counting things started counting, behinds in a pew, all right? The number of young adults is the highest it's ever been. All right, young evangelicals are not fleeing the church. What we're hearing in magazines like Newsweek is politics, not statistics, which is exactly why, as I drew your attention to a moment ago, the subtitle said, "Can the Republican Party survive?" And if you read the article, what will be clear is that Newsweek magazine doesn't know the difference between the evangelical church and the Republican Party. I'm going to comment more on that in just a moment. All right? Newsweek magazine is confusing the fact that young evangelicals are, in fact, abandoning partisan politics. Right? And they're confusing that with abandoning Christianity. It's not the case. All right? What is happening is that young Christians, young adult Christians, are differentiating their faith from voting a straight party ticket. And good for you, young adults. Good for you. But it is not the case at all that young Christians are abandoning the faith. There are more of them in church now. All right? Does it make sense? So don't get discouraged. Those are the actual statistics. We're not on the losing team. All right, the church is not dying. The gloom and doom reports about the demise of Christianity in the U.S. are politics, not statistics. And so I just want to make a little aside footnote here. And so I want you to listen carefully what I'm about to say. It is telling that our secular culture, and it's telling that the secular media doesn't know the difference between evangelical Christianity and a particular political party. It's telling that the secular culture doesn't know the difference between the evangelical church and a particular political party. And it's telling in a bad way, not about the secular media, but about the evangelical church. It's telling in a bad way, not about the media, but about the evangelical church. Because somewhere along the line, the secular culture's experience of the evangelical church in the U.S. has become more the experience of political power mongering than the experience of the evangelical church being the light of the world. The experience of the secular world of the evangelical church is more of political power mongering on Capitol Hill than us being a light set upon a hill. All right, that's Matthew 5 if you don't understand the reference. We're more Capitol Hill than a light on a hill. I want to suggest that. We've created the confusion because we've been more about Capitol Hill on the whole as an evangelical church. It's my opinion. I've got many of them, as I often say. I think it's an unfortunate commentary in the Christian church that we've become known more so to the people around us as an angry voice of a political super PAC rather than as the loving voice, of a supernatural God. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, back to statistics. The Christian church is not on the ropes. Besides the positive trend that is happening among young evangelical adults, the actual statistic of Americans of all ages who self-identify, and listen to this, the percentage of all Americans of all ages who self-identify as authentic, sincere Christians, meaning my Christianity means something to me. I practice the Christian faith in ways that are consistent with the Christian faith. That number has remained pretty much steady ever since those guys in laboratory coats started counting numbers, right? The number has not changed. The number of authentic, sincere Christians has not dropped. It's not on the decline. All right, so this is the first important point for you to know this morning is, I think next slide, the sky is not falling. Save your life, sky is falling, run, run, run. The sky is not falling. Young evangelicals are not leaving the church. The evangelical church is not in decline in America, so don't be discouraged. Christian believer in the United States, don't be discouraged. You are not playing for the losing team. And so that's point number one. All right, the second thing I want to do is I'm continuing to set the stage of what's happening in our culture so that we can understand how it is that we're supposed to be in our culture, is that there are two trends that are in fact actually happening. So this is what is really happening in the United States, and it's also important for you to know this. The first trend is this, the nominal or nunning. What in the world does that mean? The nominal are nunning. And so this chart will help you better understand what is happening. This is an actual religious statistical trend in the United States. So this little chart represents how the American population has self-identified, meaning on surveys, this is what they've reported about themselves. So on the left, and this represents, I don't know what the word would be, quartiles, 25% for this person, 25, 25, 25. So that's 100% of the population in quartiles, and that's pretty rough, ballpark approximation of how Americans self-identify. So 25% of the American population has historically identified as sincere Christians, meaning my Christianity means something to me. I am part of a church. I follow the teachings of the Bible, etc. You understand that? So 25% report accordingly. 25 plus 25, 50% of the American population, they probably don't use the word nominally Christian, but report, yeah, I'm a Christian. and they slap some sort of denominational label on themselves. But when asked, all right, how important is your faith to you? Nah. Do you go to church? Nah. Right? Does that make sense? So nominally, 50% of the population report, yeah, I go to church on Easter. I'm a Christian. I'm a Presbyterian. I'm a Lutheran. Right? I'm not picking on denominations. I'm just saying that's how they self-identify. But it really doesn't mean much to them. Right? So 25% say their faith means something to them. 50% say my faith is, it's a label I slap on myself. All right, and so I want you to notice that historically, 75% of the American population have said, I'm Christian. Right? Is this making sense? All right, and then 25% of the American population have said, I'm other or nuns, not N-U-N-S, nuns. Other meaning I'm Jewish, I'm Muslim, I am Hindu, I'm Buddhist, whatever. Those are other religions. And nuns, I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic. I am irreligious. I don't care about religion. I'm a nun. Does that make sense? So that's 25% of the population. 75% would label themselves Christian. 25% would label themselves as something other than Christian. All right, that's historically how the United States has self-identified. So now that's to set up. This is the trend that has been happening over the last 2 or 3 decades. Is the nominal are nunning, meaning probably about 25% of individuals who have historically self-identified as a Christian whose faith doesn't really mean anything to them are now identifying themselves as nuns. Used to be a nominal Christian, but now I'm really not anything. I'm not Jewish, I'm not Buddhist, I'm not an atheist, I'm just nothing. All right, does that make sense? And so what is happening is the percentage of nuns in the United States is growing rapidly. The number of Americans who would say, I have no religion whatsoever, was somewhere around 5% in 1970, and it's now somewhere around 25%. Right? And so that's why we moved 25% of the people from the nominally Christian to the nuns category. All right, the nuns is the most rapidly increasing demographic religiously in the United States. So that's a statistic that's actually happening in the United States. But so what does that mean that nominal Christians are now nunning? The nominal are nunning. Well, the doom and gloom secular media will tell you this is what it means. It means the Christian church is dying. 25% are moving out of the Christian church. All right, does it make sense? The Christian church is a sinking ship because all of these Christians, so-called, are jumping ship. That's what doom and gloom media would have us believe, but I don't think, personally, that that's the right way to interpret the statistic. I don't think that's the way to interpret the statistic. I think what it means that all the nuns or all the nominal or nunning is that the Christian church is actually becoming more authentic. Yes. The Christian church is actually becoming authentic because these, and I want to be careful, I don't want to be uncharitable in the way I'm saying it, but it means what is happening is that these half-hearted so-called Christians whose faith really means nothing to them, they're weeding themselves out. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for them to get more honest about where they really are, right? And I think it's a good thing for the church to become more pure, if I can use that phrase. I don't think this is a bad trend. I don't think Christianity is actually on the decline. I just think people who slap the label Christian on themselves and they really don't mean it is on the decline. The ship is not sinking. As I said before, the number of people who actually self-identify is, I at least am attempting to be a real deal Christ follower. That's not changing at all. I think that's a good trend. All right, so the sky is not falling. The nominals are nunning. That's an actual statistical religious trend. But I don't think it means that the authentic Christian church is on the ropes. And it's important for us to know, and it's important for us to not get discouraged about what is actually happening statistically, because I don't think it's a bad thing. Am I making sense? Okay. All right. So here's the second trend that is also actually happening in the United States. And I'd like to suggest to you that this trend has actually already happened. All right, we've crossed the line. It's a done deal. And this is it, that the church has lost home field advantage. And I'll say I stole that term from Dr. Ed Stetzer of Wheaton College. I heard him say it a couple years ago. And it's like, oh, I'm going to steal that someday. Here we are today, finally. What does it mean that the church has lost home field advantage? It just simply means that historically, our country, for the most part, our country, for the most part, has shared the belief that Judeo-Christian ethics are the way things ought to be. Historically, we've shared Judeo-Christian ethics, like Bible morality, as the way things ought to be. And so, the United States was our home turf, so to speak, for the church. We got to make the rules. Does that make sense? We had home field advantage. But that's just simply not the case anymore. That ship has sailed. I think that ship has sailed. Right? American culture has moved on from Judeo-Christian ethics. And please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying I think it's a fact. All right? The average American is not terribly bothered by whether their sexuality lines up with what's in this book. They're not sweating that. Right? The average American is not really all that concerned whether or not they're married to the person they're sleeping with. Right? The average American, like, yes, hello. Oh, the 1600s called. They want their prudish morality back. That's our culture. Again, I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying that's the way it is. That ship has sailed. All right, monogamous heterosexuality is passé. That ship has sailed. We're beyond that in American culture. And I could run through a laundry list of other issues that underscore the point, but you get the idea, right? We, the Christian church, are not making the rules anymore. We've lost home field advantage. We're in somebody else's house. Is that making sense? Yeah. In fact, I read this week, as I was doing more research for this morning, is that demographers, those who count things, are predicting that not by this upcoming presidential election, but by the 2024 presidential election, it will be the first time in American history that the Electoral College will be minority Christian. Right? Electoral College for 200 some years, United States, has been majority Christian. And that's going to change. Right? We're not on home turf anymore. We don't get to make the rules anymore. The secular culture has moved beyond the Christian faith and our book. I think that's happened. We're strangers in a strange land. All right? The culture is not playing by our rules anymore. And so that leads to the question then, what do we do as Christ followers, given where we are in this point of history? How are we to be as the body of King Jesus, whose incessant rule of peace and righteousness and justice is ever increasing? And how are we to be in this culture where we don't get to make the rules anymore? How is it that we're supposed to be? So over the summer, we're going to tease out answers to that question, all right, with regard to particular issues, particular hot topic issues, all right? And this is going to be a fun, challenging, difficult series, but I think it's an important series for this time, because we need to know how to think about these things. And I even believe that the church is becoming confused because there are voices out there that are telling us how we ought to think about these issues. And they sound good, they sound right, but we're going to explore. Is that really the way it is? All right, makes sense? All right, so what I want to do is I just want to conclude this morning with what not to do. What not to do as the body of King Jesus' rule of peace and righteousness and justice through us. All right, first of all, what not to do, number one, power politics. All right, militant power politic Christianities. Jesus never, ever said anywhere in any of his teaching, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and take over the government and enforce biblical morality on pagans. It's not in my Bible. I've read it a couple times. All right? Jesus never, ever said that. So what do we do? Well, what we don't do is we don't crawl in bed with a political party so that we can recapture the sword of political power mongering to try to force non-Christians to live by God's law. We have a whole left side of the book. We have a whole Old Testament, if you don't know what I mean by left side of the book, that tells us the law has never once changed a human heart. Right? Isn't that the left side of the book? The law doesn't change hearts. So why would we think that power politics is going to force people to have a different thought, or a different heart stance? It's not going to work. Right? And then we have a whole right side of the book that tells us that nobody will ever come into relationship with God, a loving relationship with God, by law keeping. Right? Isn't what the whole right side of the book says? So why in the world would the Christian church think that forcibly imposing Christian morality on non-Christians by recapturing political power is the hope for our culture? Right? Rhetorical question. It is not the hope for our culture. It's not the hope for a culture. No, I'm not saying that politics isn't important. Please don't hear me say that. And I'm not saying that civic law isn't important. It is. But the church is, I'm getting ahead of myself, but Jesus never commissioned us to be a political force. He never commissioned us to be a political force. All right, we'll unpack that more as the summer goes on. So what do we do as strangers in a strange land who have lost home field advantage? Well, first of all, we don't play power politics. That's what not to do, number one. What not to do, number two, we don't war on secular culture. Once again, Jesus never, ever, ever said anywhere in any of his teachings, "Behold, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and become angry, hate-filled people. Get really mad at secular culture because they're not living by God's moral standards, and write really hateful things on protest signs and scream in people's faces and post really venomous vitriol on the social media and aim it all at the secular culture." I don't think it's in here. Jesus never, ever said that, right? Audience participation. Right now, ask for a show of hands. How many of you would say that you became a Christian because some mean-spirited Christian angrily rubbed your face in what a worthless sinner you are? How many of you, that's how you became a Christian, right? Sill. No. All right, look around. How many hands are up? All right. All right, how many of you were loved into the kingdom? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there you have it. Listen to this. I love this. I'm stealing this quote from somebody else. I listened to a podcast in January, and the moderator just threw this sentence off the top of his head. And I also said, I'm going to steal that for the Culture War series. And now here we are. So in January, he said, you know what? You can't wage war on a people and reach them at the same time. You can't declare war on someone and reach them at the same time. All right? So what do we do as strangers in a strange land who have lost home field advantage? Well, secondly, what we don't do is we don't declare war on the secular culture. That's what not to do, number two. And that, by the way, is why I named this message series Losing the Culture War. Losing the culture war. And I don't mean to make the statement that we are losing the culture war. I mean to offer the suggestion that maybe we should. Maybe we should. Maybe Jesus' strategy for reaching the United States is not to declare war. It's not for the church to declare war on the United States. Possibility? I'm going to challenge us to consider that this summer. And if losing the culture war maybe sounds a little bit wrong to you this morning, I want to close with just two different quotations. Well, first of all, actually, don't go there yet, but back up. I don't quite want to go to, I want to actually begin with a Jesus quote. I mentioned earlier in the message just a passing reference to Matthew 5, where Jesus called the church to be the light of the world set on a hill, not a political power-mongering group on Capitol Hill. Light of the world. I want you to listen to how Jesus finishes that. I think I have it written down. Matthew 5, 14 through 16. It's not in your notes, so you can just jot this down. He says to us, his followers, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden." Right? No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. And so, in the same way, right, Jesus is about to tell us, this is how to be a light in American culture, y'all. So in the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see. He didn't say, let your protest signs get as angry as they can be. Let your social media posts be as hateful as they can be. What did he say? Let your good deeds shine for all to see, so that everyone will praise your Father in heaven. All right, I'm going to have one more quote. Have the worship team come forward. I love this quote from Madeleine L'Engle, who you may recognize as the author of the children's series, Begins with a Wrinkle in Time, was made into a movie just recently, I think. This is what Madeleine L'Engle had to say. We draw people to Christ not by loudly discrediting what they believe, by telling them how wrong they are and how right we are, but by showing them a light that is so lovely that they want it with all of their hearts to know the source of it. I think Madeleine L'Engle captured Jesus' heart in Matthew 5. How do we reach our culture, church? We do it by showing them a light that is so lovely. They want it with all their hearts. They want with all their hearts to know the source of it. Hey, church, let's be a light so lovely that we don't have to shove things down people's throat. They just want to know, what are you guys all about? Because it's beautiful. You want to be that? I think we do.